5,600 years ago, the side of Mount Rainier collapsed. Not erupted, collapsed. A massive section of the volcano's flank, weakened by decades of acidic volcanic gases eating through the rock from the inside, simply gave way. What came down the mountain was not lava. It was not fire. It was a wall of volcanic mud, rock, and glacial ice, a lahar, 250 feet deep at its front. Moving faster than a river in flood, and it traveled more than 70 miles from Rainier's summit. When it finally stopped, it buried what is now the city of Auburn, Washington, under 25 feet of volcanic debris. Downtown Auburn. What is now a modern American city sat under 25 feet of mud deposited by a volcano that had not even erupted, just collapsed. And 500 years ago, it happened again. A smaller lahar reached what is now the town of Orting, Washington, a community that exists today where people are raising children and going to work and making weekend plans, directly on top of volcanic debris deposited by a mountain that scientists say has not finished making decisions about what it wants to do with the landscape below it. The USGS Cascades Volcano Observatory reported just last week that small earthquakes were detected at Mount Rainier during their monitoring period. The volcano is at normal background activity. The scientists are not alarmed. But there are 150,000 people living on former lahars in the river valleys below Rainier right now. And I think every single one of them deserves to understand what the most dangerous volcano in Washington state is, why it is dangerous in a way that most people do not expect, and what the signs are that would actually tell them something has changed. Because the threat from Rainier is not the threat that most people picture. And that misunderstanding may be the most important geological education gap in the entire Pacific Northwest. Why Rainier is ranked the most dangerous volcano in Washington. Let me start with the rankings, because they tell a story that goes beyond just listing mountains. The United States Geological Survey released its most comprehensive volcanic threat assessment in 2018, ranking every active volcano in the United States on a combination of factors: the hazards a given volcano poses, the potential exposure of the surrounding population to those hazards, and the quality of the current monitoring infrastructure. Mount St. Helens, famous for its 1980 eruption that killed 57 people and obliterated 600 square kilometers of forest in a single morning, ranked second. Mount Rainier ranked third, behind Kilauea in Hawaii and essentially equal to St. Helens, due to its history of large destructive eruptions and its proximity to heavily populated areas. But here is the thing about that ranking that I need you to hear clearly. The USGS is not primarily worried about Mount Rainier erupting. They are worried about Mount Rainier collapsing. And the distinction between those two scenarios is the most important thing I'm going to tell you in this entire script. Mount Rainier is the most glaciated peak in the continental United States. It has more glacier ice on its flanks than all the other Cascade volcanoes combined. That glacial ice is sitting on rock that is being continuously weakened from the inside by hydrothermal activity, by hot, acidic volcanic gases and superheated water rising from the magmatic system below and chemically attacking the volcanic rock through a process called hydrothermal alteration. The result is a mountain whose interior rock has been converted, in many areas, from hard, stable volcanic material to something closer to soft, wet clay. USGS geophysicist Alex Ayezi, who works at the Cascades Volcano Observatory and helps monitor Rainier daily, explained it to Como News. One of the main hazards at Rainier is it's less explosive, but it has a lot of glaciers on top that can melt and form these really large lahars that can move downstream into areas people live in. The scenario that keeps Pacific Northwest emergency managers awake at night is not a dramatic, ash cloud, slow-moving lava scenario. It is a slope failure on Rainier's hydrothermally weakened flanks, a collapse that requires no eruption, no earthquake, and potentially no warning beyond a few seconds of ground rumbling, that releases the glacial ice and snowpack on the mountain's surface as a lahar that moves at highway speeds down the river valleys toward the people who live below. The 150,000 people who don't know what they're sitting on the Washington State Military Department's emergency management documentation is specific about the exposure. More than 150,000 people live on former lahars in river valleys below Mount Rainier, not near the volcano, on former lahars. The ground beneath their homes, their schools, their businesses, their places of worship is volcanic debris deposited by the same mountain that is still active above them. And the river valleys that those lahars flowed through the last time, the Puyallup River Valley, the Nisqually River Valley, the Carbon River Valley, the White River Valley, are the same river valleys where communities like Orting, Sumner, Puyallup, Auburn, and ultimately the southern portions of the greater Seattle-Tacoma metropolitan area exist today. The town of Orting deserves specific mention because it is perhaps the most striking single example of lahar exposure in the entire United States. Orting sits directly in the Puyallup River Valley downstream of Mount Rainier. A lahar from Rainier's western flank would travel directly down the Puyallup drainage toward Orting. Travel time estimates for a major lahar reaching Orting Range from approximately 20 to 40 minutes from the time of initiation on the mountain. 20 to 40 minutes to evacuate a town. On roads that are going to be clogged with every vehicle from every community that is upstream trying to evacuate at the same moment. The lahar warning signs that are posted on every block in Orting, documented by people who have visited and written about them, are not decoration. They are the physical acknowledgement that this community sits in a hazard zone that has been filled with volcanic debris twice in geologically recent memory and could be filled again. What the USGS is watching, the real current data. The Cascades Volcano Observatory's weekly update from Friday, July 24th, 2026, the most recent available as of this update, confirms that small earthquakes were detected at Mount Rainier during the past week's monitoring period. The CVO is explicit. All monitoring data are consistent with background activity levels. The current volcanic alert level is normal. The aviation color code is green. Alex Iezi's assessment that Rainier is totally at a state of background activity reflects the current scientific reading of every instrument array the USGS has deployed on and around the mountain. The seismometers that detect ground motion, the GPS stations that measure ground deformation, the gas sensors that monitor volcanic fume emissions, the infrasound sensors that detect low-frequency sounds from below the surface, background seismicity, small earthquakes that occur without any accompanying change in ground deformation, gas output, or other indicators of magmatic unrest, is a normal feature of any volcanic system. Magma at depth, hydrothermal fluids moving through fractures, and the general thermal contraction and expansion of a volcanic edifice all produce small earthquakes as a matter of routine. The detection of small earthquakes at Rainier this week is not alarming. It is not a sign that something has changed. It is the background hum of an active volcanic system doing what active volcanic systems do. What would be alarming, what the scientists at the CVO are specifically looking for as the precursor signal that something has changed, is the combination of increasing earthquake frequency and magnitude. Ground deformation detected by the GPS network showing the mountain surface swelling as magma rises toward it, and changes in the gas output that reflect increased degassing from a magmatic source. Scientists expect weeks to months of warning before a major eruption from Rainier, and that warning would look like a progressive escalation of all three of those signals together, not just background microseismicity detected during a routine weekly monitoring period. But here is the critical piece of information that I need every person in the river valleys below Rainier to hold in their awareness alongside that reassuring scientific assessment. The most catastrophic lahar scenario for Mount Rainier does not require any of those eruption precursors. A slope failure on the hydrothermally weakened rock of Rainier's flanks can occur in the absence of any increase in seismic activity, any ground deformation, or any change in gas output. The hydrothermal alteration of the rock has been happening for thousands of years. The weakness is already there. What triggers a slope failure can be as simple as a heavy rainfall event saturating the already weakened rock, or a moderate earthquake in the region that provides the final mechanical destabilization. The USGS has specifically noted that lahars can occur without an eruption at Rainier, triggered by landslides on the weakened, hydrothermally altered rock. The monitoring infrastructure and its vulnerabilities. Y'all, I want to spend a moment on the monitoring and warning infrastructure for Mount Rainier because it is a story that has both a reassuring side and an honest concern that deserves to be stated. The reassuring side is that the monitoring network around Rainier is extensive. Seismometers positioned within 12 miles of the volcano provide real-time ground motion data. GPS stations measure millimeter-scale ground deformation continuously. Gas sensors monitor the chemical composition of volcanic emissions. The USGS installed new lahar detection sensors on the mountain in the summer of 2025, specifically to provide earlier warning of lahar initiation. Sensors that can detect the low-frequency ground vibration that a moving lahar produces and trigger automated warnings before the flow reaches downstream communities. The honest concern was raised directly by Washington state emergency management officials earlier this year. John Turbush, a Washington state emergency management official working on the updated eruption response plan, flagged that federal agency staffing reductions, layoffs at NOAA, the USGS, the National Weather Service, and other agencies that play critical roles in volcanic hazard monitoring, alert issuance, and ash plume assessment could have impacts on the warning and response capacity for a volcanic event in the Cascades. His quote was specific. All of these layoffs could have impacts. I am reporting that, honestly, because I think the communities below Rainier deserve to know that the people who are most directly responsible for watching that mountain and communicating what it is doing have been the subject of institutional changes that have affected their capacity. What every resident below Rainier needs to know and do. Y'all, let me close with the direct actionable guidance for the communities in the lahar hazard zones below Mount Rainier, because awareness without action does not protect anyone. First, Know your zone. Washington State Emergency Management and Pierce County Emergency Management published LAHAR hazard zone maps for the communities below Rainier. Find out whether your home, your workplace, your children's school is within a LAHAR inundation zone. Not generally in the area, specifically within the mapped zone. That distinction matters when you are thinking about what a 20 to 40 minute evacuation window actually means for you. Second, know the evacuation routes. The LAHAR hazard zone maps come with designated evacuation routes, the roads that lead out of the inundation zones to high ground. Know which route applies to your location. Drive it. Time it. Understand where the choke points are and what the alternative routes are if your primary route is blocked. Third, understand the warning system. Sirens and cell phone alerts are the primary public warning mechanisms for a LAHAR event. A LAHAR siren in Orting or the Puyallup Valley is not the same as a severe thunderstorm warning. It means move immediately, not in a few minutes, not after you pack a bag. Immediately on foot, if necessary, to high ground. Fourth, talk to your family about this today, not someday, today. Because the families that survive major natural disasters are the ones that had a plan and practiced it before the disaster arrived. And in the river valleys below Mount Rainier, having that plan is not extreme preparedness. It is the basic responsibility of living in one of the most beautifully dangerous landscapes in North America. Y'all, small earthquakes were detected at Mount Rainier this past week. All monitoring data are consistent with background activity levels, and scientists are not alarmed. I am not alarmed. But 150,000 people live on former lahars below that mountain, and the threat from Rainier is a lahar threat that can arrive without an eruption, triggered by a collapse of hydrothermally weakened rock on a timeline measured in minutes rather than days. That is the honest, complete, science-grounded version of the Mount Rainier story. And it is the version that the communities of Orting, Puyallup, Auburn, and the southern Seattle-Tacoma metro deserve to have clearly and repeatedly communicated to them. Know your zone, know your route, have your plan. Share this video with your family in Washington State. Subscribe to this channel. I love y'all. Stay safe out there.